Hi, I'm 34 years old, and this is probably the most painful thing I'll ever write. I used to think I understood betrayal. I thought I'd experienced rock bottom years ago. But nothing could have prepared me for what I'm dealing with now. It started almost 13 years ago, when I was 21 and completely unprepared for motherhood. I got pregnant during my final year of college after a messy on and off relationship with a guy who ghosted me the second I told him the test came back positive. I was terrified. I didn't tell my parents right away. I just shut down emotionally and tried to focus on school. But my body had other plans. I went into premature labor at just under 32 weeks. That night is blurry even now. I remember the sterile smell of the hospital, the sound of beeping monitors, the fear in my chest that I couldn't shake. I was alone when my son came into the world. He was tiny. So tiny. Barely over 3 pounds. He spent the next 6 weeks in the NICU fighting for every breath. I visited him every single day. Held his hand through the incubator. Sang to him even though my voice cracked constantly. But by the time he was finally strong enough to come home, I was falling apart. I had no job, no support system, and I was spiraling into a dark depression. I wasn't okay. And no one really knew how bad it had gotten, except my older sister, Kelly. Kelly is 6 years older than me. She's always been the overachiever, the one with the big house, the stable marriage, the golden retriever. Everyone loves her. And back then, she was the only one who stepped in when things got scary. When I confessed I didn't think I could take care of my son properly, she offered to help temporarily. Just for a few weeks, she said. Until I got back on my feet. I agreed. I was desperate, ashamed, and exhausted. I signed a bunch of papers that, in my overwhelmed, sleep-deprived state, I didn't fully read. I trusted her. That was the last time I saw my son. At least, that's what I thought. The years after that were a blur. I moved to another state for work, bounced between short-term contracts, and tried my best to pretend that I hadn't left a piece of myself behind. Every time I asked Kelly about him, let's call him Liam, she'd say he was doing great. Happy, healthy, loved. She'd send me the occasional photo, a blurry snapshot on Christmas or a group pic from some family event. I clung to those, even though each one felt like a silent reminder of what I'd lost. I wasn't allowed to call him. That was the rule. Kelly said it would confuse him, that it was better if he thought of her as the stable figure in his life. She always promised it wasn't permanent. Just until he's older, she'd say. Once he can understand more, we'll tell him everything. I believed her. Or maybe I just needed to believe her. Because the alternative, that my own sister was stealing my child, was too much to face. Then, this year, something happened that broke everything wide open. It was early spring, and my mom invited me to a small family get-together for Liam's 12th birthday. I wasn't even supposed to be there originally, but a work trip got cancelled and I decided to come last minute. I told Kelly, and she was weird about it. She said Liam might not remember me and that I should keep my distance so I didn't overwhelm him. That stung, but I told her I'd behave. I just wanted to see him. The party was small. Backyard, cake, balloons. Normal. I stayed in the corner like an outsider, watching my son run around with his friends. He looked so much like me it hurt. Same smile. Same dimple. Same uncontrollable mop of hair. And then, right before they brought out the cake, Kelly gathered everyone for a video tribute. She'd stitched together clips from every year of his life. His first steps, first words, birthdays, soccer games, the works. And in every single video, she was there. Center stage. Hugging him. Holding his hand. Whispering to him. Laughing with him. And in every single clip, she was mom. She wasn't just helping. She had rewritten the story. Then the final clip played, a voiceover of Liam, smiling into the camera, saying, "Thank you, Mommy, for being the best mom in the world. I love you." I almost dropped my glass. I left before the cake was cut. I drove back to my motel in complete silence that night. No music, no phone calls. Just the hum of the engine and my hands clenching the steering wheel so tightly they started to cramp. I couldn't stop hearing his voice in my head, "Thank you, Mommy." She let him call her that. Not Aunt Kelly. Mommy. The next morning, I texted her. I told her we needed to talk. She ignored me. So I drove to her house. I didn't even make it to the front door before her husband intercepted me in the driveway. Said Kelly was really upset and that now wasn't a good time. I told him I didn't care. I demanded answers. I told him I needed to see the guardianship paperwork, the documents I signed when Liam was a baby. I needed to know what I gave away. He hesitated for a while, but then said something that made the bottom drop out of my stomach. He said, You should have read what you signed more carefully. That's when I knew something was deeply wrong. I left before I did something I'd regret. I went straight to a lawyer. I spent the next 2 weeks scraping together every document I could get my hands on. I called the hospital where Liam was born. I contacted the courthouse in our hometown. And when the lawyer finally got her hands on the paperwork I'd signed that desperate winter night, she sat me down and explained it to me in plain language. It wasn't temporary guardianship. It was a full custody transfer. Permanent. Binding. Kelly didn't just help me during a rough patch, she took my son. Legally. And I didn't even realize it. The papers were tucked into a medical release packet. I'd signed it after 3 sleepless nights in the NICU, trusting that Kelly knew what she was doing. I was 21, traumatized, and overwhelmed. No one explained anything to me. No one said it would be permanent. And according to the law, I gave him up willingly. I stared at that packet for over an hour, reading my own shaky signature over and over again. And for the first time in years, I let myself cry ugly, loud sobs that ripped out of my chest like something dying. Because maybe something had died. And it was me. After I finally stopped crying in that lawyer's office, all I could think about was one thing. Did my parents know? Did they stand by and let this happen? Had they been part of the lie too? I called my mom later that evening. I kept it together as best I could and asked her, flat out, if she remembered anything about the paperwork I signed back then. She hesitated. Said she wasn't really involved, that everything had been handled by Kelly because I was in such a bad state. I asked her if she knew I'd signed away custody permanently. She went quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then she whispered, no. I thought it was just temporary. I thought you were getting help, not losing him. That's when I realized Kelly had lied to all of us. The next day, I drove to my parents' house. I brought the paperwork. I showed it to them. My mom sobbed the moment she read the words permanent custody transfer. My dad sat silently for a long time, face hard like stone. And then he stood up, grabbed his coat, and said, let's go talk to your sister. I'd never seen him like that before. We got to Kelly's place, and this time he didn't wait at the door. He walked straight in like he owned the place. She was there, sitting on the couch with Liam, my son, curled up beside her, watching TV. He looked up when we came in, smiled, waved at my dad, and then said, hi, Grandpa. It was the first time I'd heard him say that word out loud. My dad froze. He didn't smile. He didn't wave back. He just looked at Kelly and said, we need to talk. Now. She tried to play it cool. Sent Liam upstairs. Offered us coffee. But her hands were shaking. And when my dad asked her why she never told us the paperwork was permanent, why she let us all believe it was temporary, she shrugged. Said it was for the best, that I wasn't stable. That someone had to raise him right. She looked at me and had the nerve to say, you weren't cut out to be a mom. That moment rewired something inside me. Because I had spent years grieving, blaming myself for walking away when I thought I was just stepping aside. I believed I was broken, weak, unworthy. But hearing her say it like that, with that smug tilt to her head, I knew then it wasn't about helping me. It was about taking something that wasn't hers. And keeping it. After that confrontation, everything changed. My dad didn't say a word the whole drive home. My mom cried quietly in the front seat while I sat in the back, staring out the window, trying not to scream. I felt like I was floating, outside my own body, watching someone else live this life I never meant to give up. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Kelly. It was short, cold. She said it was unfortunate that things had come to this, but that she stood by her decisions. She said she had given Liam a life I never could have. And then she ended with a line that made my blood run cold. He thinks I'm his biological mother. He doesn't know anything different, and I don't plan on changing that. I read that sentence at least 10 times, hoping it would morph into something less horrifying. But it didn't. She'd let my son believe she gave birth to him. I ran straight to my parents' house again and showed them the message. My mom looked like someone had punched her. My dad read it, sat down slowly, and whispered, she erased you. And it hit me, this wasn't just about legal paperwork or temporary guardianship anymore. This was identity theft on the deepest possible level. My son didn't know me. Not as a birth mother. Not as a presence. Not as anything. I was a stranger. Some quiet woman who visited a few birthdays and stood in the corner. He didn't know I carried him. That I named him. That I sang to him in the NICU when he could barely breathe on his own. I wanted to fix it right then. I wanted to run to him and say, I'm your mother. I'm right here. I never stopped thinking about you. But I didn't. Because part of me still remembered how fragile he looked that day in the hospital, and I couldn't do that to him, not without a plan. So I started researching. I talked to more lawyers. I looked into psychological experts. I even consulted with family counselors who specialized in custody trauma. Everyone said the same thing: dropping the truth on a 12-year-old out of nowhere would risk serious emotional harm, especially after a lifetime of lies. If I wanted any chance of reclaiming my place in his life, I had to be strategic, patient. But every minute that passed felt like one more thread being pulled between us. And it was killing me. 2 weeks after the email, I got a call from a friend of mine, an old college roommate who now works as a middle school administrator. We hadn't talked in years, but she still lived in the same town as Kelly and happened to recognize Liam's name on a student list during an enrollment audit. Out of curiosity, she looked at the emergency contact records and something jumped out at her. Kelly had listed herself as Liam's biological mother. There was no mention of me anywhere. Not as a second contact, not as an aunt, not even as a footnote. Just Kelly, listed under mother, and her husband under father. My friend wasn't trying to stir drama, but she remembered I'd had a baby right before graduation, and the name, Liam, triggered something. She told me gently that she didn't want to get involved, but she thought I should know. Said the whole thing felt strange. Strange didn't even begin to cover it. That was the first time I realized Kelly had erased me on paper, not just at home. She'd been fabricating an entire identity for my son in school records, doctors' offices, even social circles. Every form, every official record, all under her name. I wanted to scream. The worst part? When I confronted her again, this time through an official legal inquiry from my lawyer, she doubled down. Said it was necessary to avoid complications. That Liam was hers now, legally and emotionally, and having a ghost mother floating in and out of his life would only confuse him. That's what she called me. A ghost mother. I sat with that phrase for hours. But karma is persistent. About a week later, my mom called me in a panic. Liam had gotten into an argument at school after a classmate said something about his real mom. Apparently, one of the substitute teachers had referred to Liam as Kelly's adopted son, not realizing Liam didn't know. And just like that, the foundation of lies cracked. According to my mom, Liam came home furious, confused, demanded answers. He yelled, asked why people were calling him adopted, and why no one had ever told him. Kelly tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't listen. Locked himself in his room. That night, my mom got a text from Kelly. You told her, didn't you? No greeting. No punctuation. Just blame. But I hadn't said a word. The truth was starting to chase her down all on its own. And I knew this was the opening. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was racing, flipping through every moment I'd missed, every word I'd never said, and every truth he deserved to hear from me, not in a screaming match, not in a courtroom, but softly, directly, from his mother. So I did the only thing I could. I wrote him a letter. It took me hours. I started and stopped at least 20 times. Every sentence felt like a minefield. How do you tell your child he's been lied to for 12 years? How do you explain that you didn't leave him, not by choice, not really? How do you explain love in a way that cuts through the noise of a decade of silence? I told him the truth, as gently as I could. That I was young, scared, and broken when he was born. That I thought I was doing the right thing when I let Aunt Kelly help me. That I never imagined she would keep me out of his life forever. That I never stopped thinking about him. Not for a single day. I told him about the NICU, how tiny he was. I told him about the lullaby I used to hum when he couldn't sleep. I told him that I remembered the way he curled his fingers around mine, even with all those tubes in his arms. I told him I was still his mom. That no signature, no lie, and no distance could change that. I didn't beg him to come running. I didn't ask him to forgive me. I just told him I loved him. And that if he ever wanted to know me, even just a little, I'd be right here. I mailed the letter the next morning. Addressed it directly to him. Not to Kelly. Not to the household. To Liam. And then I waited. I didn't hear anything for a week. No calls. No texts. Just silence. Then, late one evening, I got a message from a private number. No name. No punctuation. It said, "Did you mean what you wrote?" My hands were shaking. I typed out a single reply, every word. No response came after that. But I knew it was him. Somewhere in all the wreckage, my son had finally heard my voice. 3 days after the message, I was lying in bed, wide awake like usual. Sleep had been a distant memory since the letter. I kept replaying the words I'd written, wondering if I'd said too much, or not enough. That's when the knock came. Soft. Hesitant. Just after midnight. My heart jumped into my throat. No one ever visits me unannounced, especially not in the middle of the night. I pulled on a hoodie and crept to the door, already half sure of who it might be, but afraid to hope. And there he was. Liam. Taller than I remembered. Shoulders broader. His hair was messy and damp from the rain, and his eyes, my eyes, were staring up at me like he didn't know whether to come in or run. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, breathing hard like he'd sprinted the last block. And then, quietly, he pulled something from his backpack. My letter. He held it out like proof. Like a question. I stepped aside and let him in. We didn't talk much. Not right away. He sat on my couch and stared at the floor while I made tea, hands trembling so hard I spilled the sugar. I asked him gently if he was okay. He nodded, but he looked like the ground had shifted under his feet. Then he finally spoke. He said he found his birth certificate. He said it didn't list Kelly at all. He said he confronted her that night after my letter, and she admitted everything. Told him I had given him up, that I wasn't ready to be a mother, that she'd done what she had to do. But it didn't add up, he told me. The way she'd always gotten weird when adoption came up in school. The way she avoided talking about his birth. The way certain memories didn't make sense, like a birthday party photo where I was holding him, but he didn't remember me being there. He said he felt like he was watching his entire life crack open. And then he looked up at me and asked, "Why didn't you come for me?" That question, it tore through me. I told him I thought I was doing the right thing. That I thought I was broken, and she was just helping. That I didn't know I'd signed away my rights. That I tried to stay close. That I was told I'd confuse him. He sat there for a long time. Then said something I'll never forget. He said, "You were a ghost. But I think I always knew you were real." I didn't cry. Not then. I was too scared to break the moment. He stayed for 3 hours. Then he left, said he needed time. But as he walked out, he turned and looked at me one more time. "Can I come back sometime?" he asked. I nodded. That night, I sat on the floor until sunrise, surrounded by silence and the faint smell of tea, and for the first time in years, I felt something that almost resembled peace. The next morning, my phone lit up like a wildfire. 10 missed calls from Kelly. 3 voicemails. 1 long, rage-filled text thread that kept refreshing faster than I could read. It was like someone had lit a fuse and she finally exploded. Apparently, Liam didn't come home until just before dawn. And he told her everything. That he'd found the letter. That he knew the truth. That he came to see me. She lost it. Her messages swung from furious to frantic, accusing me of poisoning him against her, of ambushing him, of trying to undo years of stability. She said I'd ruined everything she built, that I'd thrown a grenade into the family. Then she sent one last message, "He's my son. Don't forget that. Not legally. Not emotionally. You gave him up." I didn't respond. An hour later, my mom called, her voice tight with panic. Kelly had shown up at their house, screaming and crying. Said I was manipulating Liam. Said she was going to file for a restraining order. Said she'd never let me near him again. But this time, my parents didn't play neutral. My dad told her to leave. Told her she'd hidden the truth long enough, and that if she tried to twist the narrative, she'd be standing alone. My mom, between sobs, asked her how she could lie for 12 years and still claim to be the victim. Kelly stormed out. And later that night, her husband, who had always stayed oddly silent through all this, called me. I almost didn't pick up. But when I did, his voice was low. Defeated. He said he didn't know how bad it really was. That he thought I had agreed to give up my rights. That Kelly had told him I'd walked away willingly. And when he started digging through their files, he found something she never mentioned. A second letter. A letter I'd written during Liam's 2nd year, asking for more visitation. Asking if I could take him for weekends. A letter Kelly never gave him. A letter she never responded to. She had hidden it. Buried it in a box of tax records. He told me he didn't know what to believe anymore. But he knew one thing, Liam deserved the truth. All of it. That night, I got another message. This time, from Liam. It was a photo. A blurry, off-center shot of the tea mug he'd used at my house. Under it, 2 words, "Still thinking." And I knew, Kelly could scream, threaten, erase my name from every form. But the cracks were permanent now. She couldn't control the narrative anymore. It's been 6 weeks since that midnight visit. 6 weeks since my son looked me in the eye and saw me, not as a stranger, not as some distant figure in a photo, but as his mother. And yesterday, he made his choice. It started with a phone call. Short. Awkward. He asked if I'd be home that afternoon. Said he wanted to talk. No promises. No expectations. I said yes, of course. I barely breathed for the next 3 hours. When he arrived, he was carrying a duffel bag. His face was calm. Resolved. Not angry. Not scared. Just ready. He told me he couldn't go back to pretending. That he still loved Kelly, but that he couldn't forgive the lies. That knowing who I really was didn't erase everything she'd done, but it made him want to understand where he really came from. Who he really was. What else had been kept from him. He asked if he could stay for a few days, just to see what it felt like. I didn't cry in front of him. I smiled. Told him I'd love nothing more. I made his favorite meal, something I didn't even know was his favorite until he told me. We watched old cartoons. Laughed. I showed him baby pictures he'd never seen. I even found the tiny blanket from the NICU, frayed, faded, but still soft. And he asked me to tell him everything. So I did. I told him about the night he was born. How terrified I was. How hard he fought in the hospital. How I used to press my ear against the incubator just to hear his breathing. I told him about the lullabies, the late-night letters I wrote but never sent, the birthdays I watched from afar. And I told him the truth about Kelly. Not to turn him against her, but because he asked, because he deserved it. He didn't say much when I was done. He just sat there, holding that old blanket, staring at the TV that wasn't playing anymore. Then he whispered, "I think I want to stay a while." And that was it. No dramatic music. No big moment. Just the quiet return of something I thought I'd lost forever. Today, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway and the faint clatter of cereal bowls. And for the first time in over a decade, my house felt full. Alive. It's not a fairy tale ending. There's still paperwork to untangle. Therapy ahead. A broken family to navigate. Kelly hasn't contacted us since Liam left, and I don't expect her to. But I'm okay with that. Because this morning, when I walked into the kitchen, Liam looked up from his cereal and said, "Good morning, Mom." And that word. Mom. I've waited 12 years to hear it. And now? Now it's mine again.